Perhaps one of the starkest images for the airline industry has been the sight of line after line of jets parked on runways waiting to take to the skies. As more countries start to ease their COVID-19 lockdown rules, attention is returning to the global aviation industry, which had been almost entirely grounded for months. Some passenger airlines have kept skeleton fleets flying for repatriation missions. Some have converted passenger jets to use as cargo planes. But all of them would much rather return to their primary objective, flying people safely around the world. But when planes do take to the skies again, how much impact will the pandemic have on how they function? And while COVID 19 is unprecedented, the past can offer indicators for future trends. The middle seat debate has been raging on, and we know that real estate on an airplane is expensive, and airlines usually don't want to sacrifice space. Lately, a design of a reconfigured airplane cabin with double-decker lie flat seats in premium economy is also doing the rounds and is being touted as a possible solution for flyers looking for more protection from the spread of COVID-19. Today, we have with us Vinod Kannan, Chief Commercial Officer, Vistara, to discuss the future of aviation post-COVID. Prior to joining Vistara, Vinod has served as the Chief Commercial Officer of Scoot Airlines, Singapore Airlines' low-cost subsidiary, where he was instrumental in launching long-haul operations, mainly to cities in Europe. Welcome, Vinod. Pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for having me.
Vinod, aviation revenue generation is directly linked to traffic levels. The flight bans and cancellations are leading to less flights, hence, of course, less revenue coming in. Unlike other players in the tourism industry, when traffic demand falls, aviation has limited ways of reducing costs. The cost of operating airport infrastructure remains the same, and airports can't close down or relocate terminals and runways. Airlines are considered to be a capital intensive and risky business to get into. Every now and then, we hear of airlines being in trouble worldwide. What could be the reason for this, and do you foresee this perception changing in the future?
The aviation business has been exposed to a lot of global events. As you can see, even with COVID, I think aviation and travel-related businesses have been one of the worst affected. So even during the normal, so-called normal times prior to COVID, aviation business has always had its challenges because, as you rightly said, there's a very high cost to set up an airline in order to purchase aircraft, for example. Many of the costs are outside the control of the airline. For example, fuel costs, which usually constitutes about 30 to 35% of normal airlines' operating costs. That's something that the airlines have no direct control over, including the aircraft costs, which I mentioned, and also fixed costs at various airports. So even during the normal or good times, aviation has always been challenging. But the fact remains that there are certain parts of the world where aviation does have a lot of scope and a very much brighter future. India happens to be one of them. I'm sure you're aware that there are multiple reports that only about 3 to 4% of the Indian population is currently flying. So there's a lot of scope for the growing middle class to actually take an airplane and fly, because air travel still remains the safest and quickest way to get from point A to B. So that fundamentally does not change. I don't think the virus or the COVID pandemic has put any end to it in the medium to long run. But yes, in the short term, there will be an impact. All airlines had been grounded for 2 months, as you know. We've just restarted operations. We're doing about 20 to 30% of our usual capacity. I'm sure, I hope, with the support of our customers and through you guys, that will improve as time goes on.
Vinod, aviation sector, no doubt, is one of the hardest hit sectors during the current COVID-19 pandemic. What steps do you think the aviation sector could take to avert or minimize the vulnerability of this sector nationally and worldwide?
There are all airlines are looking at multiple steps, including Vistara. I mean, I can comment specifically about Vistara. So in the short term, there are a lot of discussions that we are having with our various service providers, with all the people who are our partners, to see how we can either make some changes to our agreements, to see whether payments can be reviewed or contracts can be reviewed. So that's something that's far-ranging, and that's happening even as we speak across each and every cost item. Secondly, looking at our internal costs, we've also tried to see what areas we can be a bit more frugal. One of the aspects, like other airlines, remains which remains in our control, is staff costs. So we've had to take the bitter step of having some changes to remuneration to about 30% of our staff, while the 70% who are frontline entry-level staff are not affected. But yes, the remaining 30% of staff have had to take some changes to the remuneration in form of a no pay leave, compulsory no pay leave scheme. So that's as far as staff costs are concerned. But having said all this, I think fundamentally, again, I reiterate that we are very confident about the Indian market, especially for Vistara, since, as you might know, we've also we have very bold ambitions, and we're going to start flying long haul from India. We've ordered our 787-9 Dreamliners, the first of which was delivered just before the lockdown, and there are 5 more coming through this year and the next. So these will be used for flights to Europe, to North Asia, to further other parts of the world, where we believe there will actually be more demand because people will want to travel direct flights and people will value the Vistara brand.
Lockdown also provided an opportunity for businesses to test the viability of virtual meetings, conferences, exhibitions, and even, for that matter, court proceedings. Opinions may vary, but it was successful to some extent. Post-COVID, do you think the corporate sector will definitely adopt virtual meetings, conferences, exhibitions to some extent? And so if that happens, we may see a proportionate decline in air travel for business segment, which is an important segment for air travel or for any kind of tourism. So what is your opinion on this?
In the short term, I think you're right. Given the fact that we were forced to operate from our homes for about 2 months, everyone is a bit more used to the various virtual conferencing solutions like the one we have now in front of us. And there's no taking away from that. The question really depends. The question that remains to be answered is how effective it is, especially in terms of business deals, where you still need that human-to-human interaction to some extent. There are certain discussions and meetings which can take place over virtual conferences, but not all of them can be done. So I think fundamentally there is still a requirement for face-to-face meetings and travel. That is not going to change. I think you're right that in the next few weeks or few months, there will be lesser amount of people traveling for business, mainly because of the situation that we have, because of the various regulations and the movement restrictions in place, plus the fact that many of the companies may be looking at reviewing their spends. But I would say that very soon, maybe next year or in the medium term and beyond, this is not going to go away. I think virtual conferencing cannot replace travel. People travel for a variety of reasons. There is nothing like having a meeting with your counterpart or with your business partner and then going for a lunch or drinks later. I think that is never going to change. And humans are innately going to remain social. It's going to be tough for everyone to say you remain at home and you work from home. So I think that fundamentally, yes, there will be a slight change in the short term, but the medium to long term prospects for aviation and airlines remain still the same.
Vinod, when 9/11 happened, it led to more stringent security measures adopted widely in tourism and mostly in the aviation sector. And for all COVID is likely to introduce stringent hygiene and distancing norms as well, particularly for aviation sector. Both of these are very necessary, but it does kind of cut on the customer experience, So on the other hand, web check-ins have eased flyers' experience. What factors or innovations do you foresee in the future, which is going to affect or also improve customer experience?
The pandemic and the related lockdown has caused everyone to review some of the customer-facing aspects. So specifically for airlines, and I can once again speak for Vistara, there are a couple of things that we've taken on in a much bigger way. One is flexibility, to be able to give the customer the choice of when they want to travel. For example, we've extended tickets till 31st of May, all the way till 31st of March 2021, without the customers even contacting us, and that's available for them to travel. Similarly, we've reviewed our policies for refunds, reaccommodation, and so on. So that is the first part, which is process related. The second part is actually regarding digitalization, and I think you brought this up. If you had asked me in the month of January or February, prior to the lockdown, whether we would expect this 90 to 95% of people checking in online, web check-in or mobile check-in, I would have said, unfortunately, I would not have said that we would have had this success. So this pandemic has given an opportunity for us as a silver lining to review some of these processes. Customers are getting used to web check-in, off airport check-in, which I think is a wonderful thing, and that should continue. Similarly, we are also reviewing other self-help mechanisms within Vistara, whether it's the website, whether it's the mobile app, and so on. And these digital innovations and self-help methodologies or tools would be something that we think customers will learn to value and will require coming down the road.
Vinod, there are certain things, the use of face masks, hand sanitizers, PPE suits, or a gown for for the person sitting in the middle seat. So there are certain norms that have kind of stuck on in the post-COVID world. But we know that this is until a vaccine is discovered. Once the vaccine comes in, we will be doing away with some of them. But what are some of the things which you think, should be imbibed by the aviation industry as an SOP for future as well?
Again, as I said before, a lot of digital initiatives, the things that have been put forth by airlines as part of the SOPs, those I think will remain and will come to stay, which is a very positive sign. The other aspects in terms of following regulations and rules, and I'm very thankful for all our customers for doing this. To give you an anecdote, I think in the past when the aircraft came to a halt and before the pilot made any announcements, everyone used to get up and start walking towards the door. So that is a thing of the past now. At least on our aircraft, people are still very methodical. They understand the need to actually follow this distancing and rules. So yes, some of these things have had a mindset change because of COVID, but some of these will continue because the orderly way in which the social distancing is done, the orderly way in which some of the operations are conducted, I think is something that we will draw upon even for the future. So the mentality of customers has changed. They understand that safety and distancing and hygiene is very important. And that is something that I think will be a lasting effect of this pandemic.
Vinod, you raised a very pertinent point about mentality of the customers. And here in every discussion that we have, we talk about the responsibility of aviation companies, airlines. We talk about the responsibility of tour operators, of states, destinations towards the customers, But we should also be discussing about the responsibility of the customers towards these entities to ensure that travel remains safe and seamless and everything. So what, according to you as an airline, is the responsibility of a customer as far as COVID-19 is concerned?
This is exactly what we had discussed internally at Vistara prior to opening our operations and taking to the skies again. So if you could, I would encourage you to go and visit our website where we actually have a campaign that's running. It's called Let's Make Flying Feel Safe Again, which lists out all the different things that we as an airline are doing in the aircraft, in the airport, whether it comes to cleaning, whether it comes to making sure that customers are taken care of with minimal interaction, whether it is time required to check in or to board. So all these are SOPs and procedures that we have done on our side. And we also encourage customers to follow some similar procedures on their side. For example, we are providing all customers masks and hand sanitizers and a face shield. We encourage customers to use them to make sure that they clean their hands very regularly, make sure that they do not loiter around the aircraft, make sure that the use of the toilet, for example, is minimized, that you don't walk around in the aisles. So these are all things that we have tried to think and come through with a comprehensive list, which once again are detailed on our website. But the point that you made is very pertinent, is very valid. It takes two to tango. So as much as airlines and the airports can put in a lot of measures, it ultimately requires the customers to follow some of these cardinal rules as well.
As much as we're talking about responsibilities, airlines we know are trying really hard to build passenger confidence. And like you talked about, sanitizers being used, making the customers aware of their responsibilities as well. If you have to talk about not just Vistara, but generally the aviation sector in general, how, what are the steps if you have to talk about airports and, everyone involved in the aviation sector? What steps do you think that everyone is taking? What are the steps that they are taking to bring back the confidence in flying?
I think the biggest confidence booster for most customers or for most passengers who are looking to fly would be the fact that since the 25th of May, when all airlines took to the skies, not just Vistara, but all Indian airlines, since the time they took to the sky to today, which is almost coming to a month after start of operations, the process of flying and the process of actually right from leaving your doorstep until you reach your destination has been relatively hassle-free. I mean, yes, it's not been the same as before. It can never be the same as before because of all the additional regulations and requirements for safety purposes. But I think by and large, the entire aviation ecosystem, and I have to thank the ministry, I have to thank the airlines, the airports, as well as travel agents and the flying passenger. Everyone has come together to make sure that it remains very safe. Yes, there have been instances of people who have been diagnosed as COVID positive, but that's a function of testing. For many of the states or destinations that the airlines fly, customers are required to do tests when they land. So yes, there might be asymptomatic passengers that get captured, but there are a lot of steps along the way that as an ecosystem we've put in place, from temperature checks, primary and secondary checks, to not having human intervention, to not serving meals, which was very dear to us at Vistara, for example. Now we don't serve a meal on board to reduce contamination. We also do not provide a magazine, which was very well subscribed to Vistara magazine. So we've made some painful cuts to our product offering, just in the interest of safety and hygiene. And everyone together has worked quite closely and quite well to ensure that the entire journey has been relatively safe and in fact, very safe and relatively hassle-free.
Right now, you said that you're functioning with 30% capacity than your normal thing. If you have to talk about connections, which are the connections that are doing very well for Vistara specifically?
There's been a change versus the situation pre-COVID, meaning before the lockdown. Before the lockdown, we used to have a lot of people traveling for business on a day trip. For example, people going from Delhi to Mumbai and then traveling back on the same day in the evening. That, of course, has reduced now. There's a lot of flow of traffic from the main cities, the major cities, to other parts of the country. Whether when you look at the eastern part of the country, for example, whether it's Kolkata, whether it's Guwahati, or whether it's Patna, that has been a sector that we've seen. These are all sectors that we've seen a lot of demand. Of course, it remains to be seen what happens when business travel slowly starts coming back. Leisure travel has remained low. Not many people are traveling for a holiday yet, also because hotels are not taking reservations probably, but we hope that day comes soon.
If you have to talk about, the topic for our discussion today is the future of aviation. If you have to encapsulate the future of aviation post-COVID, how would you describe it?
I would say three important messages. One is safe. Aviation has always been a very regulated and very structured means of transport, a means of travel. That has not changed. Even if you look at traveling in flight, in fact, the aircraft would be one of the safest places to be in as compared to other modes of transport. Very simply because there are high efficiency filters which take away virus and bacteria, including the corona. The airflow is top to bottom. It's not something that's going from front to back. So the chances of infection are very low. Not to mention everyone is wearing a mask and a face shield. So safety, I think, is something that we will never compromise. And I think that's number one. Second is the whole process of digitalization that I said. There will be more people who will be opting for self-help. There will be less interaction face-to-face with other people or other agents or other staff. I think that is here, at least in the short term, to stay. And last but not the least, I think at least from Vistara's perspective, despite the fact that we've cut back on many of the aspects that we are very famous for, from food to beverages to magazines and so on, I believe that we are here to provide that trust that customers can travel with us with peace of mind, and we will make sure that their journey is very safe again. So safety remains the most central theme, but I think it's a matter of time before people realize that flying from place to place is no different from, say, going to the supermarket because of all the checks and measures in place.
Yes, Vinod, everybody has been talking about the fact that air travel is one of the most safest modes of transport. What we are talking about right now is we are talking about a digital, contactless, seamless experience as far as airports and airlines are concerned. But one essential factor of tourism and of travel and hospitality industry is the human touch. So if we're talking about everything going digital and contactless and, everybody doing their own thing and no physical boarding passes and everything, what about the human touch in travel?
The human touch will always remain, and it will remain where it's the most important and most valuable. So even before the COVID times, there were a lot of people who wanted to embrace digital technology. I think the advent of the various measures, including apps for payment, such as, the various measures which are available now compared to what it was, say, 4 or 5 years ago, where it was basically just cash or credit card, for example. Everyone has to embrace certain changes in technology. I think that's a given, including ride sharing, including all the different shared economy aspects that have come about. But the human touch, or the so-called soft touch, is something that we believe is never going to go away. When there is a situation, whether it's an emergency, or whether it's something that is medical, or whether it's something that the customer requires help, that's when I think every airline or every service provider will prove their worth. So we, as Vistara, with a rich pedigree from both the Tata as well as the Singapore Airlines side, we believe that we are in the best position to do this, because we have an extensive internal training program specifically around these matters, how we can take care of the customer's needs. Yes, there will be a lot of focus now on moving away from face-to-face contact for some of the regular kind of interactions. So instead of checking in your bags, we are looking at, instead of giving you a paper receipt, we might give you an electronic receipt. Instead of having a paper boarding pass, you will have a digital boarding pass. So those things are essentially different forms of something that was required in the past. But the experience you have on board, where you will interact hopefully quite soon with our crew, is not going to go away. So our crew are known to take care of our customers. Our crew are known to interact very well with customers. Of course, with having masks and face shields, that makes it a bit tougher at this point in time. But as we have no doubt that we'll return back to fly along the same lines quite soon.
Thank you, Vinod, for this perspective. The airline industry is indeed at a key turning point and has been adapting very quickly to the new normal. Passengers have also taken very well to procedures like the web check-in and contactless baggage drop, which you've talked about. In the long term, this could play out in various ways, and this is majorly dependent on the duration of the crisis. However, digital, contactless, and safer than ever before pretty much sums up the new normal for the tourism industry in general and the aviation industry in particular. Thank you, Vinod, for engaging with us today. Thank you very much for your insights on this.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this session today.